Okay guys, so now we're going to learn about the try, catch, finally loop in Java. Now, the previous video in this series covered exceptions, which kind of did veer off into try and catch, but we haven't covered the whole of try, catch, finally yet. So we'll cover that in this video. If you haven't watched the previous video, please go back and watch that. It'll give you a lot of context for what we're about to learn about. So let's just create a new project called try, catch, follow. Press create. Okay, cool. So now let's write some code that might produce an exception, right? Let's create some space here. I'm going to go like string. I'm going to create a number string, right? So a string with numbers in it. So we'll call it number string. We'll go equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 as a string, right? And we'll create our try loop here, like we did in the previous video. And let's try and cast this string to an integer. So we can actually do this by going int number equals integer dot pass int bracket, and then pass in the number string as a parameter, semicolon at the end. And let's just print this out, right? So we'll go system out print number. Now we can go ahead and catch any exceptions that go on here. So for example, we could get an exception, and this is just a general exception. We could make this a number format exception, but for this specific use case, we can just use exception. And let's go print error handled, even though we haven't handled the error, but let's just pretend that we have for demo purposes. And then another thing can go on the end called a finally block. And it works like this. So we're finally curly brace. And then whatever is in here is what gets executed after all of this, whether there's been an error or not. So for example, let's say we want to print system out. Let me get rid of that comment. System out print process complete. Cool. Now let's run this and see what we get. So as you can see, we get the number. It was casted successfully without any errors. And we don't have to catch an exception because nothing bad happened here. And then finally, after all of this, we see process complete. Now let's put some letters in here, right? Let's pollute this with letters, which will make this an invalid number. Therefore, it won't be able to be casted to an integer. And that will throw an exception, and it will bring us here. And let's see what happens. So as you can see, we can see error handled, but then we still have this process complete down here, because this finally will fire after either or of these. Whether this was successful or it failed and caught an exception, we will always go to this finally block after. And there's many reasons why you'd want to use this, right? So it is executed regardless of whether the exception has occurred or not. And it's often used for things like cleanup activities. So we can put clean things up here. We won't go into the specifics of how that would work because this is just an isolated example. But it allows us to gracefully manage things like errors. So hopefully that was a good enough explanation on the try catch finally. If any of you have any questions, if anything's unclear, please do put it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one.